Hello, friends. Thank you for joining me again. We are now on chapter 6 of the Lotus Sutra. A big shout out and thank you to Christopher Murray and Debbie Schaefer-Reed for their generous contributions through Patreon, helping me to pay for continued internet access and the needs of creating these kinds of programs for you. Enabling me to carry out my Buddhist mission as a bodhisattva of the earth, a mission I encourage all of you to take on personally. That's what this is all about. Oh, and before I run out of power and have a glitch in my video like I have the last couple of times, I'm going to plug it in. All right, now away with that silliness. And let's do Daimoku Sancho and we'll get right into it, okay? Here we go. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Chapter 6. A word came to mind this morning. I was talking to a student about chapter 6 as I was reading it over, preparing myself for this video. And the word that came to mind is hyperbole, which, as words go, may be another clue to help you understand, as I do, the form of Shakyamuni's sermons. They all follow this form. When he talks about the sands in the Ganges, and usually something numeric. When he talks about realizations, he says that you'll see, you'll be with 3,000 million trillion kotis, blah 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 of Buddhas, and all of these things. These are very large, unfathomable numbers he's trying to create. And what he's doing is he's using hyperbole as a form of what we would call now argumentation or debate. It's a form. It's a technical form that seeks to make a point of an argument or a position by grotesque, if you will, exaggeration or unfathomable contexts to explore or to explain just the profoundness or the truth of or the reality of. It's so real that it is incontrovertible by virtue of how huge my example is. This is a form. This is a form of teaching, and it exists throughout all of Shakyamuni's sermons and even the commentaries on the sermons. So you really have to work hard to disconnect our human samsaric conditioned mind of, our human minds just want to make patterns out of everything. So we tend to obsess about numeric values, like everything is absolute and real. This has often been said, you can't take these kinds of teachings literally. However, if you can make the mental shift to, as soon as you start hearing this hyperbole, understand, oh, this is a really important point. If you can make that shift, you will greatly relieve yourself of confusion and very clearly understand what the intent of what's being said is. And Buddhism is all about intent, isn't it? And this is what Shakyamuni's constantly talking about. Don't focus on the words, focus on the meaning. The meaning is what's essential. So I'm going to drive this meaning forward with these huge wordy examples, not because the words are important, but because your samsaric grasp of reality is so attached to them that I'm going to use them against themselves. I'm going to use your mind's wanting to quantify everything and blow it apart with these huge examples so that what you're left with is, okay, this is just really big. And that's the form of the discussion, do you see? So, this is important because as we enter chapter 6, especially, assurance of becoming a Buddha is our modern explanation of the title. H. Kern from the 18th or the 19th century says, announcement of future destiny. Okay. It's much more earthy, isn't it? Okay. But even the idea of becoming a Buddha is a little bit hyperbolic. It's not about becoming something. It's about removing the obstacles, unveiling your already Buddha mind capacity. But do you see how that can get lost in the hyperbole? So let's get into it, and it won't take very long before you get it, what I mean. At that time, after speaking these verses, the previous chapters, the world-honored one addressed the whole great assembly in words like these. Now, you remember what the great assembly is, right? Billions and millions and kodas of bodhisattvas, Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, lay people, lay women. It just, right? This is for everyone. That's the hyperbole. In a future life, this disciple of mine, Mahakashyapa, will go before 3 million billion world-honored Buddhas, making offerings to them, revering, honoring, and praising them, and proclaiming the innumerable great teachings of the Buddhas everywhere. In his final incarnation, he will be able to become a Buddha whose name will be Radiance Tathagata, one worthy of offerings, truly awakened, fully clear in conduct, well gone, understanding the world, unexcelled leader, trainer of men, teacher of heavenly beings and people, Buddha, world-honored one. His land will be called Radiant Virtue, and his eon will be named Magnificently Adorned. So, there is one term in here, though, I'm going to pick out because it may have stood out to you as it did to me. When he speaks about well gone, what does that mean, well gone? You'll see it in many, many Buddhist sermons, commentaries, teaching. Well gone, well born, even, but well gone, especially. What does that mean? The struggle in Buddhism, quite simply, from the start, is that we live this life with sufferings due to a lot of deluded thoughts, attachments, and the attachments are the result of cravings for things, for being, craving for instantiation, creating a momentum and a kinetic energy of just want. And that kinetic energy, that volition, that will, is what continues to drive us for ownership, for having. All right, that's desire. That is the samsaric condition that we're in. And Buddha method is all about recognizing that that's what we're doing. And by recognizing it, we can begin to remove our attachment from it. We recognize it for what it is. It's kind of like when you're a little kid and Mom, give me that toy, and you'll cry, you'll pitch a fit, and blah, 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 blah. And you may pout about it for all the way home. You may pout about it for a week. I want that toy, I want to get that toy. And at some point, your life condition will raise, you'll get older, and you'll realize there was no value in having that toy. You know, it was just something that when you were a little kid, you really wanted. And as you get older, you can look back on that and laugh, and eventually you'll just forget about it altogether, right? So this is what Buddhism is about in a very real way, is that our samsaric condition is to be like a little child that just wants everything. Want, want. Mine, me, right? And Buddhism says, look, if you can just raise your life condition to the point where if you can meditate, if you can force your inner thoughts to see that behavior, to understand that behavior, and eventually to quell that behavior, you know, calm down, calm down, calm. In Shakyamuni's terms, he used the analogy of monkeys screaming and yelling for attention and in the trees and jumping from branch to branch. You know, it's like our mind changing opinions and jumping around and always wanting attention. Me. Other scholars have called that our ego. Some take the ego apart to say our id and, you know, all these different parts of the ego. So, don't really want to go into psychoanalysis because that's a very narrow field and there's a lot of pitfalls in it. But I'm just trying to make an example that what we're trying to do in our practice of study and meditation is to understand how our mind is controlling us instead of we controlling our mind. Okay, so the idea is that when we can finally wrest control from this huge desire machine of attachment and watch our lives objectively, in a way, what we've left behind is our human samsaric condition. And what we are then is a conscious, fully conscious being without influence from our desires, our cravings, and for attachments. We leave that desire for attachments altogether. So we are well gone. Our attachments, our samsaric conditioning is now gone. And we, in the Buddha mind, are then instantiated, awakened, enlightened. Do you see the polarity now? And this is why it becomes very obvious that achieving the Buddha mind or Buddhahood or Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it, is not leaving this human body and going to another land, like the Pure Land kind of thinking, or another place, or another astral plane, or whatever, what have you, whatever mysticism people try to inculcate into Buddhism. It's not right. What Buddhism is about, living this life without suffering. That's it. That's all. But it's very difficult. So, I mean, the shift that's required in order to attain Buddhahood is quite phenomenal. And that's why it lends itself to hyperbole, because with our human attachment to thingness, to numbers, to quantification of everything, very, very, very difficult to switch that off while being aware, awake, human, still in samsara, but not conditioned by samsara. Still in samsara because you still observe it, and you see it not only from the standpoint of having left it and knowing what it is, but seeing it very obviously in everyone else. Right? Doesn't that happen in other ways in your life? When you go through a great trauma or a great realization, suddenly you see everyone around you and you understand, oh, they're so trapped by that. They just don't see. Right? Same thing with awakening. That is where the Buddhist compassion, real compassion, comes from. It's not an emotional, empathetic response. It's a realization of the trap of samsaric conditioning. That's super, super profound, okay? So again, back to the hyperbole. And this is, so that's well gone, all right, or well arrived. This is what the word tathagata means: isness, suchness. Also, there was another term I wanted to. He talks about the last incarnation. That's because of this modern translation. It's not called incarnation. It's called in this book. It's called the last body. Where is it? The last bodily existence. See, that's a more accurate translation. Basically, we get back to the idea that our lives are not a continuous string that evolves. It's, if you remember anything from geometry, a line is a series of points. Okay, I'm going to take a moment to describe that because it's an important concept. Think of a point. What is a point? Right away in your mind, you envision a dot, like you took a pen or a pencil and went, there's a point. But that's not a point. Because if you go close enough up to it with a microscope, you'll see that it's several thousands of points, right? And those are not points, they're dots. A dot is a thing. A point is a location. A point is an XYZ location. There's nothing there. And yet, if we take that location and we repeat it in succession, one next to another, or one after another, more accurately, because it's really time that's at work here, we can perceive a line of locations that are nothing. In geometry, we settle on the illustration of those locations. At this point, we make a dot, and at every successive point, we make a new dot, and we see a line. Now, remember this analogy, because this is exactly what Shakyamuni was trying to describe as a lifetime, is that our lives are a series of discrete moments of instantiation of a huge complexity, an amalgam, several amalgams, of instantiation of desire, craving, to be, I. Now, if you can conceive of that huge matrix going, here I am in this very moment, the momentum of that being wants to continue. But things are ephemeral. Things don't exist forever in and of themselves. There's no atom or molecule or particle beneath a quark in a quantum field that's called Sylvain. There is none. I am a huge amalgam. Well, I'm not that huge, but anyway, I'm a huge amalgam of energies that want to instantiate, and because they have kinetic energy, because they have momentum to be, they form or catapult another moment. But in that second moment, or that next moment, I'm not completely what I was the moment prior, because every time I instantiate, I'm influenced. I'm influenced by the environment that I create, that I'm in. And so there's a constant change going on between moment to moment. We perceive this slowly as development, aging, evolution. We have all kinds of words for it. But ultimately, as we progress from moment to moment, continually instantiating and inculcating effects from the causes that we've made from moment to moment, and respond to the influences that we're affected by in moment to moment, we kind of have an arc where we develop until we reach a nexus, and then we start to decay. Okay? So this is also where one branch of study and erudition from Buddhist sermons and commentaries talks about living in the moment. That's kind of a modern idea, but this is what it's pointing to. It's saying that to cease the craving and desire is to cease this inculcating energy, this momentum of constantly instantiating. And if you can do that, you can stay in a moment, and then time has no effect. So in realizing complete full Buddhahood, Buddha mind, this arc of decay only affects the bodily form. But in our mind, no longer being attached to that bodily form, we are no longer affected by that decay. So we can remain completely awake, aware, and just see the awesome beauty of the process of life, not only in ourselves, but in everything. Great blades of grass, flowers, cattle, ants, birds, people, earth, everything. So hopefully I'm giving you a scope, since this chapter is about becoming a Buddha, or as Curran says it, coming to your final realization of what's really going on. Destiny, he calls it, which is a little bit Hinayana, I have to admit, because that kind of assumes a pre-order. And certainly if you just follow your karma and samsara and you never try to educate yourself on the big questions, why am I here, what am I doing here, if all of that doesn't interest you and you just plummet through life, destiny might work because you're just letting it play out. Okay? As Buddhists, we want to be a little more conscious than that, right? So, now, when he talks about meeting all of these Buddhas and what the length of a lifetime will be when you attain this full enlightenment, again, the hyperbole is, this is the effect. This is not actual. You won't last 20 million eons. But the effect of your realization will be the realization that lasts that long. The mind, the depth of your thinking will be that profound. And the effect of your life on others will last a very long time. Right? How many times have you heard people at funerals go, well, she's gone, but she'll live in our hearts? I remember hearing an analogy of people always die twice. They die when they leave their body, and they die again when the last person who remembers them dies. That's kind of a, kind of a parum-pump, but there's a deep insight in that. All right, so enough commentary. Let's just read, because I think now we'll know firmly what's going on. The lifetime of this Buddha will be 12 small eons. His true Dharma will remain in the world for 20 small eons, and his merely formal Dharma will also remain for 20 small eons. His land will be magnificently adorned, free of all evil pollutions, rubble, thorns, or thistles, and filthy pools. Anyway, it says toilet waste in here. They didn't have toilets 2,600 years ago. In H. Curran's translation is dirty pools. And you can imagine that they still do today in Vietnam, for instance. A lot of the homes of the rice paddies are built up on sticks 20 feet above the rice paddies, and they poop through a hole in the floor. So their poop and pee just goes into the fertilizing of the soil. So you can imagine. Anyway, so it's going to be free of all that. The land will be level and smooth with no high or low places, hills or valleys. The ground will be lapis lazuli, lines of jeweled trees and golden cords will mark off its roads. It will have precious flowers scattered all over it, and whole place will be pure and clean. The bodhisattvas of that land will be innumerable hundreds of billions, and there will be innumerable shravakas. There will be no deeds of the devil there, and though the devil and the devil's people will be there, they will, it just said no, will all defend the Buddha Dharma. So, and then he goes into prose to say all of this. So again, this is all perceptive reality. This is the mind exercise, right? This is all of Buddhism is a thought experience, a thought experiment, if you will, but a pointed one. So when he talks about the land appearing this way, this is, if you've ever been in a trauma, like a bad car accident or even in a sports, you got badly hurt or whatever, some kind of a trauma, or you just lost somebody, somebody else went through a trauma and it traumatizes you. And my point is that as human beings, we encounter, things that are very difficult for us to make sense of, we tend to greatly, greatly simplify. And when we do that, outside of our sadness and the pain, the suffering that we feel, we have moments when we look out a window, forlorn, trying to make sense of it all, and we see a grasshopper land on the windowsill. Or we look at the concrete by the hospital and we see a little daisy coming out of the crack in the concrete. And all of a sudden it's so significant, right? Or you just look over the roof and you see a little puff of cloud just slowly moving across the sky, and you're transfixed on the amazing process of the cloud moving through the sky. Do you see? That's our Buddha nature. So even within misery, our Buddha nature fundamentally sees the incredible nature of life. When we talk about the 10 worlds, which we're not doing yet, but I've talked about it in other videos, and I will again, this is what we're talking about. These are the mental realms that we've constantly float through while we're in samsara. And they contain each other. The 10 worlds are contained within the 10 worlds. So if the world that we're looking at is the world of insatiable hunger and desire, there is in that world a Buddha hunger world. There is a Buddhahood state within that world. And that also means that in the Buddha state exist all the other 9 worlds. This is another argument I can make just from talking about the 10 worlds, that the Buddha nature, the Buddha mind, is not something foreign to the human life. It is within our samsaric reality. It's just a shift of perception. That's all. So just do it. Okay. Then as he ends his, and in the comments, if you want me to read every single line of the prose section, because it would help you, or you think that it would, please let me know. I'm skipping a lot of that unless there's something specific I want to point out, because it's really, although there's a greater granularity to the repetition, it is still a repetition, and I just want to move through the concept of each chapter. But make a comment. I'd really like it if you read the whole thing, then I'll start doing that. If enough of you ask me, I must, right? So he ends this particular round. The merely formal Dharma will also remain for 20 small eons. This will be the story of the world-honored one called radiance. See the repetition. Then Mahamagalyayana, Subhuti, and Mahakatyayana and others, all trembling with excitement, put their palms together in rapt attention and gazed up to the world-honored one's face, not for an instant lowering their eyes. With voices in unison, they sang in verse, and they're all grateful for this amazing prediction of Buddhahood for this Mahakashyapa, right? Then the world-honored one, knowing the thoughts in the minds of those great disciples, addressed all the monks. This Subhuti, now he's addressing all the monks, but he uses Subhuti as his point of conversation. So remember, this keeps going back and forth, but it's all hyperbole, and the conversation is one for everyone. This Subhuti, in a future life, will come before 3 million billion myriads of Buddhas, making offerings, revering, honoring, and praising them. He will always observe noble practices and follow the Bodhisattva way in his final incarnation, in his final body existence, in his final moment of samsaric existence, in his final moment of being well gone and leaving the samsaric craving inertia of life, of his, not death, of his constant deluded mind resulting from these insatiable desires to instantiate. In that final moment when he lets all that go, he will become a Buddha whose name will be famous features Tathagata, one worthy of offerings, truly awakened, fully clear in conduct, well gone, understanding the world, unexcelled leader, trainer of men, teacher of heavenly. Same thing as he told Mahakashyapa. But you get it now? That last incarnation, that last bodily existence, he's talking about that moment when you fully awaken. When you fully release that samsaric kinetic energy and you become clear, awakened, enlightened, Buddha. You're still alive, you're still human, you're just no longer attached to that process. Follow? This is what the people who talk about reincarnation or lifetime after lifetime, they don't get. And it is, as Shakyamuni says, it's very difficult to understand because it's very difficult to envision, right? So hopefully I'm doing a better job of describing it. I'm trying. His son, or his eon, will be called possessing jewels, and his land named birthplace of jewels. The land will be level and smooth, crystal, blah, 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 blah. Right? Same prediction. This lifetime of this Buddha will be 12 small eons. Dharma will continue. At that time, the world-honored one, wanting to say what he meant, once again spoke in verse. You, multitude of monks, I have something to tell you now. Give your full attention to what I have to say. My great disciple Subhuti will become a Buddha, whose name will be famous features. He will make offerings. The offerings and all that are the dedication of his time to understand his cravings and quell them, unattach himself. That's what all those 3 trillion Buddhas he's talking about. He'll be having those moments of watching the sky and the cloud, and he'll make that his basis for his life. He will see all things in that way. That requires releasing the desire, this momentum, this kinetic energy, to just go on without him. Still remaining alive and human, but no longer conditioned by the samsaric condition of craving and being. Follow? At that time, the world-honored one once again addressed the assembly of monks and said, now I announce to you that this Mahakatyayana in future lives will make offerings to and serve 800 billion Buddhas. revering and honoring them. After those Buddhas have passed into extinction, for each of them he will put up a stupa 1,000 leagues high. These are intentional thoughts. These are myriad fantasies of the, what you would say in English, the glory or the awe of awakening, of the dedication it takes to finally release the samsaric desire machine and become unattached. Having made offerings to all those Buddhas, he will complete his bodhisattva way and become a Buddha whose name will be Jambunada, golden light Tathagata, one worthy of offerings, and so on and so forth. His land will be level and smooth, repeating the same thing. The four evil paths will not exist there. Those of purgatories, hungry spirits, animals, Ashura, see, these are the worlds now being defined. Hell, hunger, animality, anger. But the human and heavenly beings will be many, so those worlds will still exist. And innumerable billions of Shravakas and Bodhisattvas will adorn the land. They also worlds. The lifetime of that Buddha will be 12 small eons. His true Dharma will remain, and then he goes into repetition with the prose again. Then the world-honored one once again addressed the great assembly. Now I say to you that Mahamangagayana will make offerings to 8,000 Buddhas, revering and honoring them, and goes through the same process, becomes a Buddha. Obviously, what he's stating is it's going to take great effort that you are capable of doing, no matter what your state is now. Remember, these names and these people are all about certain samsaric states, human beings, and human minds, I should say, sorry. Beings in the sense that the minds are being, right? And he's describing all of them. For them, he's taking the opportunity of each one to describe how the realization might seem. For some, it's all this cleanliness. For some, it's the support of the different schools of thought around them, like Bodhisattvas, Shravakas, and so forth. And then he goes into verse again. So this is why this chapter is called those predictions. But you have to understand that all those predictions are made for all of us. That what he's really talking about is in respect to your efforts. And some of you have to make efforts that where you serve 3 billion million Buddhas. But others of you only have to make efforts of 80,000 Buddhas. So what he's saying is, even not everybody attains their Buddha mind and awakening in the same way. The resultant land that you end up in, the resultant condition that you end up in is equal. You have all of these same things, maybe subtle differences, but they're all wondrous. But your effort to get there will differ depending on your particular karmic struggle. What do you have to overcome? And it's not about physical difficulty. It's about mental difficulty. In fact, your physical difficulties are produced by your mental difficulties. Because everything comes from that craving desire machine that we are. Or that our samsaric reality is. Is a better way to say it. Because what we are is not that samsaric reality, but something far removed from it, unattached to it. That's our true identity. And the earthly identity that we have, Sylvain, Bob, Kathy, whoever, is a construct. A construct partly just plummeting along as an amalgam of karma. That karma makes your DNA, if that helps you relate to it a little bit more. We all have different DNA, and they only understand a very, very tiny portion of how DNA works, but they do know that we have a lot of commonality, that we can trace it back hundreds of thousands of years, tens of thousands of years for humans, and there are many parts that are still quite mysterious to science, but we understand molecularly how we continue to rebuild ourselves in every moment. We have cells dying and new stem cells that are programmed by our DNA to go replace those dying ones. And our mind influences how that mechanism works. Do you see? So if our mind influences how that mechanism works, then we can use our minds to ignore that mechanism from the standpoint of being attached to it and remove our expectations and simply become observers of this wondrous process. Living that life, released from the pressures and influences of this momentum, is a freedom that we almost dare not try to describe in words. It's can only be experienced. Thus the word awakening or enlightenment. Right? Okay. So that's chapter 6. Next we'll move on to chapter 7, which is going to take this concept a little further. Now that he's made this prediction or this path in thought available to his followers, he's now going to tell them in another flowery, abundant language what that might be experienced like. And that's going to be the next chapter, okay? So in the first half of the Lotus Sutra, we're still dealing with a teaching that's exploring how to do this. In the second half, we're going to explore not just how to do, or what the, how can I say this? Maybe the availability of the process of Buddhist practice versus the real inculcated truth, the stuff from which it is made, and how to practice in order to achieve all of these hyperbolic realities. We'll get to it when we get to it. It's a little ways away, but we're almost halfway through the first half. So that's a quarter of the way, right? Anyway, thanks for joining me. Ask questions. Let me know if you want me to read the full prose sections as well. Because if enough of you think that that's important, I certainly will do it. Maybe it'll only take one of you, but depends. I will await your pleas. and also tell me, no, we get it. You talk enough outside of the the actual reading that we get it. You don't need to add any more to it. I appreciate all of it. All right. Thank you so much for being here. Let's close with Daimoku Sancho. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you can, visit my Patreon page. I'm also posting more written text, white papers, brief explanations on things. So not just videos, but also some text that you can find on my website, but I think they might be handy for people who go to the Patreon page and just want to know what's karma, and they don't want to go to the website. They're already on Patreon. So I'm trying to remove as many obstacles to your practice as I possibly can. Clever, ain't? Have a great day. Love you all. Respect you much. Bye for now.